Before we start, how did you like that new intro? I know it's not all that different from the old one, but I wanted to slide a few more exciting clips into it and touch up a few bits, and I think it came out pretty well. Anyway, you're not here for my rambling about my intro, you're here for the Namekian build. You guys remember Namekians in Xenoverse 1, right? They were so OP, it wasn't even funny. People sensationalized male Earthlings as the most OP race in the game, but those people who never fought a Namekian before? Oh. The longer throw range, the weird jump punching, and if you couldn't tell, that was all sarcasm. Fuck me raw if Namekian combos weren't complete dog shit in Xenoverse 1. They were so bad that I didn't even have one as part of my squad, which for those of you who don't know is what I call my group of characters, and I opted to make a third Earthling instead. But how do they fare in Xenoverse 2? They're not terrible? But it still took me a little while to get a feel for how their combos worked and what works best with them. So now, after all this time, I think I came up with something pretty good with what I dubbed the Ultimate Tribal Warrior build. Now, unlike the way I normally do these build videos, I could only find one stamina break combo, which if you don't know is 1 light attack, 2 heavy attacks, and then the heavy stamina break. But that same combo is so unreliable that I can't really make a substantial segment explaining how to combo into stamina breaks. But all is not lost in the way of setting up ultimates. I have a few moves in my skill set that will fill the void, so for now let's go ahead and skip to the equipment and stats. Now this particular Namekian build is a mixed brawler and a ki blaster. And so the QQ Bang I chose for him is one that gives you -5 in health and strike supers, +5 in both ki and stamina, +4 in basic attacks, and +1 in ki blast supers. Even though the bonus to ki blast isn't anything substantial, the boost in basic attack damage more than makes up for it when it comes to landing the build's death combos. Obviously, I don't really need any boost for strike supers, even though I have a few in my skill set, but we'll get to those. As for super souls, there are only 2 I use on a regular basis for this build, and those 2 are a monster, no I'm a devil, and the ultimate power is mine. I use the latter more often because it offers a flat damage boost for all damage stats without the need to transform or perform any other action like other super souls have you do, but I also sometimes use Broly Super Soul when I'm fighting a weaker opponent and I want to be able to finish with one of my finisher combos. Finally, let's look at my stats. Since my guy is a brawler ki blaster hybrid like my male Saiyan, I wanted to make them as high as possible while also taking advantage of a Namekian's tanky nature. So I decided to put a flat 100 in basic attacks and ki blast supers. Health was the attribute that I put points in last, so it wound up as an uneven 103. Even when my QQ Bang reduces my health by 5, I still have enough to push my health into a partially green bar. Lastly, I put 42 points into stamina to give a grand total of 8 bars so I can make use of my transformation. And now that I've essentially spoiled which form I use in this build, I think it's time we got to the skill set. Now this is one of my more unique presets in that one section of it, that section being all 4 of my super attacks, are all utility skills, and my 2 ultimates are for sheer damage. Before we get to those though, let's quickly talk about my escape move and transformation. I feel like I don't really need to explain what makes hyper movement so good, but for those ill-informed viewers, hyper movement teleports you in front or behind your opponent, and if they're using an ultimate or blocking in the direction of your strike, it'll break through their guard. Aside from a few exceptions, this is essentially my go-to escape move. As for my transformation, if you somehow haven't deduced that it's giant form, well, it's giant form. Now why would I waste my time with a transformation that was basically nerfed into the ground? Well, it's because it wasn't. Saying that something was nerfed into the ground implies that whatever was nerfed is completely worthless, and that just isn't the case with giant form. While I won't doubt that it was problematic in its prime, which for those of you who weren't around at the time or never fought one, a giant Namekian was essentially a ticket to a free win, the purpose of the form isn't at all hard to see. It's a match ender. When victory is pretty much secured, giant form can be used to deny the chance of a comeback by your opponent. I'll save the details of giant form for my guide when I eventually do that, but for now, all you need to know is that I use it when I don't have enough ki to use one of my death combos and a match is about to end. Now we can get to the meat and cheese of the build, and yes, I am using the word cheese unironically here. Like I said, all of my super attacks are simply for utility. Dodoria Headbutt is used as a setup for one of my ultimates. Arm Crash is not only useful as a quick finisher for certain combos, but, as most people already know, will grant you a few seconds of super armor and can break through the guard of a blocking or ultimate using opponent. Burst Rush is mainly used as my first line of defense when my giant form runs out early, but it's also a second setup for Dodoria Headbutt, and Meteor Blow is my primary means to land either stamina break attack. Meteor Blow is low-key the best strike skill in the game for the sole reason that you can cancel the second kick and substitute for any basic combo, another super or ultimate attack, or even a stamina break attack much like Shining Slash does. Finally, my ultimates consist of Meteor Burst, the very same one I featured in my original Savage Queen build, and Death Ball. Both of these are extremely strong on their own, and paired with some of these combos I use with them, they can result in an instant win halfway through a match. So now that the skeleton of the build is done, let's talk about some neat tricks you can do with this, and let me tell you, as uninterested as I originally was with Namekians, these tricks alone cemented this guy as part of my squad. Now most of these skills are primarily meant to set up both of my ultimates, but all but one of them can be used in a more offensive way. Arm Crash, for example, aside from allowing you to essentially steal a stamina break without the risk of getting caught, can also be tied at the end of 4 different combos I use. The first and easiest way is to use 1 light attack and 2 heavy attacks, which will knock your opponent to the ground, then immediately using Arm Crash. This particular one allows you to open it a little higher on the ground, but you still need to be relatively close. Another one that essentially does the exact same thing is using 5 light attacks and 3 heavy attacks, then following up with Arm Crash then. This one needs you to be a bit closer to the ground when you start the combo, but it does essentially the same thing, but it also adds a little bit more damage. 2 more ways you can combo into Arm Crash involve 2 other skills. You can cancel the second kick from Meteor Blow and use Arm Crash then, and you can also use it after the last hit from Burst Rush, assuming you land relatively close to the ground. Dodoria Headbutt is only ever useful as an ultimate setup because of its ending animation. If you don't know what the move does, it propels you towards your opponent, and if it lands, it breaks their stamina and forces them into a recovery state that a heavy stamina break normally does. This effect can also happen if you start with a light stamina break, then use Dodoria Headbutt as well. If you do nothing after it hits, you'll be stuck in a long animation, but you can immediately follow up the Headbutt with another ultimate as long as you do it before your character begins the ending animation. There are 2 ways that I combo into Dodoria's Headbutt. One is doing 5 light attacks and 3 heavy attacks, and if you're close to the ground when you start the combo, then the Headbutt will land after the bounce. Too high and your opponent can roll out of it before you get anywhere close. It can also be comboed into after Burst Rush, assuming that the last hit connects a distance above the ground. If it hits too close to the ground, however, Dodoria Headbutt has a chance of missing. There isn't much I can say about Meteor Blow other than I use it as a setup for both stamina break attacks. As I said earlier, there aren't many useful stamina break combos for Namekians other than the knockback stamina break and the charged heavy stamina break, so having an extra is extremely helpful. Finally, Burst Rush is my main defense for when I get pulled out of giant form. Not only that, but as I previously mentioned, I can combo into several other attacks after the final hit, making for easy punishment for anyone recklessly eager to capitalize on my weakened state. I'm the type of player who likes to take advantage of certain baits, and one of my favorites to pull off with this build is to go into giant form as soon as I possibly can and put out as much damage as I can while regenerating ki in the background, because when you transform you get auto-regenning ki, forcefully breaking my stamina to bait my opponent into triggering Burst Rush, then using one of my ultimate death combos. Speaking of which, let's talk about my 2 ultimates. Death Ball is the one I use immediately after Dodoria Headbutt, which is the only logical one to use since Meteor Burst is a point-blank ultimate. But there is a weird thing that needs to be kept in mind when doing this combo. Death Ball's initial activation can tap your opponent at close range, meaning anyone who's in your face when you activate it will get staggered. This can happen if you use Death Ball too soon after the Headbutt, which will not only cancel the knockback, but also the recovery your opponent would normally have to endure, and gives them the opportunity to break your stamina, or otherwise prep for defense. So be wary of that and be sure to wait a moment after the Headbutt before activating Death Ball. Meteor Burst on the other hand takes a bit more oomph to take full advantage of with this build. Unlike my Savage Queen who usually lands Meteor Burst after a heavy stamina break, this is not the primary way I set up this beast of an ultimate for my Namekian. I use several combos to set up Meteor Burst, but they all start with essentially the same couple of starting stamina break attacks. The easiest one is the knockback stamina break, but I can add a little bit more damage by doing 4 heavy attacks, using Meteor Blow, and then canceling the second kick with a light stamina break. Even with how long a Namekian's light stamina break is compared to other races, doing it too early can result in you missing, so be sure to account for that. I also make sure to do this after I get someone under 2 bars, since that results in your opponent essentially being in their break state for as long as if you had stopped them from using an ultimate. This leaves enough time to do a variety of different combos, all of which however must end with a knockdown combo which immediately puts your opponent in the ground. 2 easy ones are the previously mentioned 5 light 3 heavy attack combo, as well as one that I didn't mention before. That combo is the heavy light heavy combo. That one does a bit more damage. While that first combo I mentioned can only be used in the way I stated, the second one can actually be set up in a number of ways. It can be used after 6 light attacks, which is basically the equivalent of the first heavy attack in the combo. You can also use 8 light attacks and 1 heavy attack to trigger the last knockdown attack, but there's also a flashier step cancel combo that I like to do. It's done by doing 5 light attacks, 2 heavy attacks which kicks your opponent in the air, stepping towards them, doing a heavy light combo, and instead of using a heavy attack like a normal combo, use a light attack, then the heavy attack. That'll add slightly more damage. Whichever combo you do, use some stamina to teleport beneath your opponent, then use the quick version of Meteor Burst and watch that health bar disappear in no time. It took me a long time to get used to Namekians, especially when they were so unimpressive in Xenoverse 1. I basically had extremely low expectations going in, even though their transformation and healing factor are their biggest saving grace. This build took a lot of time and effort to get just right, but after all that, I think I did an alright job. I hope you enjoyed, and if you want to give this build a try, I hope you like it. The next build will be on my Ki Blasting Frieza Race character, so look forward to that, and I'll see you in the next video.